Sir, I'm sorry, but your military ID is expired. We can't accept this as valid identification. The words hang in the air of the crowded museum lobby, drawing curious glances from nearby visitors. The elderly man standing at the admission counter blinks in confusion, his weathered hands trembling slightly as he examines the faded ID card. But I've had this since I served, he says quietly. It's the only military identification I have. The National Military History Museum in Washington, D.C. is bustling with activity. A special exhibition on the Vietnam War has just opened, attracting veterans, history enthusiasts, and tourists alike. The marble floors gleam under the bright lights, and the walls are adorned with flags and photographs of military heroes throughout American history. The admission clerk, a young woman in a crisp blue blazer with the museum's emblem, sighs with practiced patience. Her name tag reads Amanda. She's dealt with this kind of situation before. I understand, sir, but our policy is clear. We need current, government-issued identification for the military discount. I can offer you the standard admission rate instead. The man, tall despite his slight stoop, with silver hair neatly combed, wears a simple brown jacket and khaki pants. Nothing about his appearance suggests anything remarkable. Just another senior citizen visiting the museum on a Tuesday morning. But the pins on his jacket, small and unobtrusive, tell a different story to those who know what to look for. The exhibition today, he begins, his voice barely audible above the museum's ambient noise. It features the 173rd Airborne. I came all the way from Ohio to see it. Amanda's expression remains professionally neutral as she gestures to the price list displayed beside her counter. The standard admission is $24.95. Would you like to proceed with that option? Behind the elderly man, a line is forming. People check their watches impatiently. A school group chatters excitedly near the entrance, their teacher attempting to corral them into an orderly formation. I was hoping to use the military discount, the man says, reaching for his wallet. I'm on a fixed income these days. Sir, Amanda's voice sharpened slightly. I've explained our policy. Your ID is expired. I need to assist other guests now. The elderly man's shoulders slump almost imperceptibly as he stares down at the worn military ID in his hand. 74-year-old James Harrington had been planning this trip for months. Every detail had been arranged with meticulous care, the bus ticket from Columbus, the modest hotel room he'd saved for, even the new shirt he'd purchased for the occasion. The exhibition on the 173rd Airborne Brigade was only scheduled to run for 3 weeks, and it featured photographs from his deployment in 1968. Some of his brothers-in-arms might be there. Some might even be in those photographs, frozen in time. Looking at him now, few would guess James had once been a strapping young paratrooper who had jumped into combat zones with a full pack and an M16. His 6 feet 2 inches frame had diminished somewhat with age, his back slightly curved from years of factory work after his service. The arthritis in his right knee, a souvenir from a bad landing during his 3rd combat jump, had worsened over the winter, necessitating the wooden cane he now leaned on. His hair, once dark brown, had turned completely silver, though he still kept it trimmed short in a military style. The wrinkles around his eyes deepened when he smiled, which had become less frequent in the 5 years since his wife Margaret had passed. His granddaughter said those smile lines made him look distinguished, like an actor in one of those old black-and-white movies. Today, he wore his favorite jacket, brown corduroy with leather elbow patches, which wasn't particularly fashionable but had deep pockets for his medication and the small notebook where he jotted memories as they came to him. 3 small pins adorned his lapel, one for the 173rd Airborne, one Purple Heart, and one American flag. He wore them every day, a quiet reminder of the brotherhood he'd found during those harrowing months in Southeast Asia. Amanda Pearson had been working at the museum for just over 8 months. At 26, the recent college graduate saw her position as a stepping stone to a curatorial role at one of D.C.'s more prestigious institutions. She prided herself on efficiency and rule-following, qualities her supervisor had praised in her recent performance review. The museum had strict protocols about identification and discounts, and she enforced them uniformly. Behind Amanda, museum director Thomas Blackwell observed the interaction from across the lobby. Tall and imposing in his tailored suit, Blackwell had transformed the once struggling museum into a sought-after destination through rigorous attention to procedure and image. On opening day of a major exhibition, With board members and donors present, everything needed to run perfectly. Is there a problem here? Blackwell approached the counter, his voice carrying the practiced authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. This gentleman is trying to use an expired military ID for admission, Amanda explained, straightening her posture in the presence of her boss. Blackwell gave James a cursory glance. I'm afraid our policies are quite clear, sir. Perhaps you could return another time with the proper identification? Around them, museum guests in expensive attire navigated through the growing line, some casting judgmental glances at the holdup. James Harrington looked down at his worn military eye. The lamination cracked at the edges, his much younger face staring back at him from a time when he believed the world might actually recognize his sacrifices. Comment, honor those who served, if you believe our veterans deserve respect regardless of the age of their identification. Perhaps we could make an exception just this once, a woman in line behind James suggests. It's clear he's a veteran. Director Blackwell turns to her with a practiced smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Ma'am, if we made exceptions for everyone with a story, we wouldn't have policies at all. The museum operates on strict protocols. James Harrington places his expired ID back into his wallet with deliberate care. His hands, marked with age spots and prominent veins, move with the precision that comes from decades of discipline. I understand, he says quietly. Rules are rules. But Director Blackwell isn't finished. Something about the old man's dignity irritates him. Perhaps it's the board members watching from across the lobby, or the pressure of the exhibition opening, or simply the disruption to his perfectly orchestrated day. Sir, there are numerous government offices where you could have updated your identification. Veterans Affairs provides current ID cards specifically for these situations. His tone has taken on the condescending quality often reserved for explaining simple concepts to children. It seems rather irresponsible to travel all this way without ensuring you had the proper documentation. A muscle tightens in James's jaw, but his expression remains impassive. 55 years of holding his tongue through far worse than this has made him an expert at concealing his feelings. I don't get to the VA much these days, he says. It's a long drive, and my son used to take me, but he's overseas now with his job. Amanda shuffles uncomfortably behind the counter, sensing the situation veering into unnecessarily harsh territory. Mr. Blackwell, perhaps we could— Amanda, we have a system here. Blackwell cuts her off. The standard admission fee is hardly prohibitive. If the gentleman truly wishes to see the exhibition, surely $24.95 is a reasonable price to pay. The line behind James has grown longer. Murmurs of discontent ripple through it, some directed at the delay, others at the treatment of the elderly veteran. I only receive my Social Security, James explains, his voice steady but quieter now. I budgeted for the discounted rate. Perhaps I could come back another day. Blackwell checks his watch. That would be advisable. Now, if you'll step aside, we have other guests waiting. A security guard materializes at Blackwell's signal, a young man with a communication earpiece who looks distinctly uncomfortable with his assigned task. Sir, I can show you to the exit, the guard says apologetically. James nods and begins to turn, leaning heavily on his cane. The pain in his knee has worsened from standing so long. It's a shame, he says, almost to himself. My squadron is in those photographs. I haven't seen some of those boys since '69. Excuse me, a distinguished-looking woman in a navy pantsuit steps forward from the crowd. I'm on the museum's board of directors. Surely we can accommodate this gentleman. Blackwell's smile tightens even further. Dr. Reynolds, with all due respect, this is an operational matter. We cannot verify this man's military service without proper identification. For all we know, for all you know what exactly? Dr. Reynolds challenges. Are you suggesting he's fabricated his military service? That he purchased those pins at a costume shop? James interrupts gently. Please, ma'am, don't trouble yourself. I don't want to cause any problems. You're not the one causing problems here, Dr. Reynolds says pointedly. Blackwell's face flushes. Security, please escort this gentleman out. Now. The young guard hesitantly places a hand on James's elbow. Sir, please come with me. As James allows himself to be guided toward the exit, a hushed tension falls over the lobby. Several patrons exchange uncomfortable glances. A Vietnam-era veteran in a wheelchair near the information desk shakes his head in disgust. Shameful, someone mutters, just loud enough to be heard. Outside the gleaming glass doors of the museum entrance, James Harrington stands alone on the wide stone steps, squinting in the bright morning sunlight. James has barely descended 3 steps when the distinctive sound of vehicle engines draws his attention. 3 black SUVs with government plates pull up sharply to the curb in a synchronized maneuver that speaks of military precision. The lead vehicle's door opens before it has fully stopped. A hush falls over the area as pedestrians instinctively move aside. Even the city traffic seems to quiet in deference to what unfolds. From the lead SUV emerges a tall figure in an immaculate dress uniform adorned with 4 silver stars on each shoulder. The insignia alone commands immediate respect, but it's the commanding presence of General Michael Rowland that holds everyone's attention. At 65, General Rowland moves with the vitality of a man 20 years younger. His uniform, meticulously pressed and adorned with rows of ribbons and medals, tells the story of a lifetime of distinguished service. Behind him, 6 military aides exit the other vehicles, their uniforms equally pristine, their movements choreographed with practiced efficiency. The general pauses at the bottom of the steps, his eyes scanning the scene until they lock onto James Harrington. For a moment, he stands perfectly still, then his weathered face transforms with recognition. "Sergeant Harrington," he calls, his voice carrying with the authority of someone accustomed to being heard over artillery fire. "James Harrington of the 173rd. James turns, confusion giving way to disbelief as he studies the general's face. Recognition dawns slowly, then all at once. "Lieutenant Rowland?" The old veteran straightens instinctively, decades falling away from his posture despite the pain in his knee. "My God, it's been 54 years, 2 months, and 17 days. The general finishes, climbing the steps with purposeful strides. When he reaches James, he does something that causes gasps from onlookers and dropped jaws from his aides. 4-star General Michael Rowland, commander of the Joint Special Operations Command, salutes first. "Sergeant James Harrington," he says formally. "It is my distinct honor to see you again, sir." James returns the salute with military precision that belies his age, his back straightening, his chin lifting in the muscle memory of 1,000 such gestures. "The honor is mine, General," he replies, his voice stronger now. By this time, a crowd has gathered. Museum patrons press against the glass doors, watching the scene unfold. Director Blackwell emerges, his expression oscillating between confusion and alarm. "What's happening here?" he demands, then falters as he takes in the general's uniform and rank. General Rowland turns, his eyes hardening as they fall on Blackwell. "Are you in charge of this establishment?" Yes, I'm Thomas Blackwell, museum director," he stammers, automatically extending his hand. The general ignores the offered hand. "Perhaps you can explain to me why Sergeant James Harrington of the 173rd Airborne Brigade, recipient of the Silver Star, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart, is standing outside your museum rather than viewing the exhibition that quite literally features his heroism?" Blackwell pales. "There was an identification issue. Our policy requires—" "Your policy," General Rowland interrupts, his voice dangerously quiet, "prevented one of the most decorated paratroopers of the Vietnam War from entering a building that exists to honor men like him." The museum lobby has fallen completely silent. Even the school children have stopped their chatter, sensing the gravity of the moment. "General, if I might explain," Blackwell begins. "No explanation is necessary." The general cuts him off. "What's necessary is for every person in this building to understand exactly who this man is." He turns to one of his aides. "Major Davis, secure the main exhibition hall. I want it cleared for Sergeant Harrington's private viewing." "Yes, sir," the aide responds crisply, immediately moving into the building. Another aide steps forward with a leather portfolio, which the general takes and opens. On April 17, 1968, during the Battle of Khe Sanh, then Corporal James Harrington's platoon came under heavy enemy fire, General Rowland announces, his voice carrying throughout the lobby. When his commanding officer was critically wounded, Corporal Harrington took command. Despite being wounded himself, he organized a defensive position that held off waves of attackers. Blackwell's face has gone from pale to ashen. Amanda stands frozen behind the admission counter. During that same engagement, the general continues, when a young lieutenant, myself, was pinned down by sniper fire, Corporal Harrington crossed 30 yards of exposed terrain under heavy fire to drag me to safety. He then returned through that same killing field to retrieve 2 more wounded men. James looks at the floor, uncomfortable with the recitation of events he spent decades trying to forget. For his actions that day, he was awarded the Silver Star. The citation noted that his extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service. The general closes the portfolio. And today, this hero was turned away from your door. Director Blackwell's voice falters as he attempts to regain control of the situation. General Roland, I assure you, had you known. The general's voice cuts through the lobby like a blade. Had you bothered to look at the man standing before you instead of just his ID card, you might have recognized one of the subjects of your own exhibition. The crowd that has gathered is now completely silent. Even the security guard who had been escorting James out stands frozen, his face a mask of mortification. Wall 7, third photograph from the left, General Roland continues. Sergeant Harrington carrying a wounded soldier through the jungle near Pleiku. That image is featured in your own promotional materials. A flash of recognition crosses Amanda's face. She's seen that photograph dozens of times in the exhibition preparations. Furthermore, the general continues. Sergeant Harrington's name appears on the list of Silver Star recipients displayed in your Medal of Honor room. The same medal that is currently being denied entry to your establishment. 2 more military vehicles pull up outside, and a team of uniformed personnel enter the lobby. They move with quiet efficiency, speaking into communication devices. General, one of the officers approaches. The exhibition hall has been secured. Thank you, Major. General Roland turns to Director Blackwell. Mr. Blackwell, I'm hereby informing you that this museum will be closed to the public for the remainder of today. You can't do that. Blackwell protests, then immediately regrets his words as the general turns his full attention on him. I most certainly can, General Roland states calmly. As a member of the Joint Chiefs and the military liaison to this federally funded institution, I am exercising emergency oversight powers to conduct an immediate review of accessibility policies as they pertain to veterans. From across the lobby, Dr. Reynolds approaches. The board fully supports this action, General Roland. In fact, I'll be calling an emergency meeting this afternoon to address this incident. The museum patrons begin to murmur as military personnel politely but firmly direct them toward the exits. Several veterans who had been visiting approach James, offering handshakes and words of support. I don't want to cause all this trouble, James says quietly to the general. You're not causing anything, old friend, General Roland replies. This is long overdue. Do you know how many veterans have probably been turned away because of bureaucratic nonsense like this? Amanda steps out from behind her counter, approaching James with genuine remorse written across her face. Sergeant Harrington, she says, her voice unsteady, I am so deeply sorry. I was just following policy, but that's no excuse. I should have. It's all right, young lady, James interrupts gently. You were doing your job. No, she shakes her head firmly. I was hiding behind rules instead of seeing the person in front of me. The general nods approvingly at her words. Director Blackwell attempts one final defense. Our policies exist for a reason. We can't just... Your policies exist to serve people like Sergeant Harrington, not to exclude them, General Roland interrupts. Did you know the 173rd Airborne suffered some of the highest casualty rates in Vietnam? Did you know Sergeant Harrington's unit held a critical position for 3 days without reinforcements or proper supplies? He steps closer to Blackwell, his voice lowering. Did you know that there are fewer than 30 surviving members of his original company? And today, when one of those survivors traveled hundreds of miles to honor his fallen brothers, your policy turned him away. By now, the museum has mostly emptied of visitors. Military personnel stand at strategic positions throughout the lobby. Dr. Reynolds is on her phone, already speaking with other board members. Sergeant Harrington, General Roland says, turning away from the thoroughly chastened director, would you do me the honor of viewing the exhibition privately? I believe there are some photographs you'll find particularly meaningful. James nods, emotion making it difficult to speak. As they walk toward the exhibition hall, the general places a supportive hand on James's shoulder. You know, he says quietly, I never properly thanked you for saving my life that day. No thanks needed, James replies. We all did what had to be done. Indeed we did, the general agrees. And we continue to do so. Behind them, Director Blackwell stands abandoned in his own lobby, watching as the military personnel efficiently reorganize his carefully planned exhibition opening. His secretary approaches nervously, tablet in hand. Sir, we're receiving calls from the press. Word is spreading on social media about what happened. What should I tell them? Blackwell stares at the retreating figures of James and the general. Tell them, he says slowly, that the National Military History Museum is closed today to honor a hero. The following morning, the National Military History Museum reopened with a transformed atmosphere. A new sign stood prominently at the entrance. Veterans welcome, no ID required, your service is identification enough. Director Blackwell was noticeably absent. An emergency board meeting had resulted in his administrative leave pending review. In his place, Dr. Reynolds greeted visitors with a warmth that had long been missing from the institution. Amanda, rather than being terminated, had requested reassignment to veteran outreach. Her first task, implementing a new program to connect with retirement homes in the area, offering transportation for elderly veterans who wished to visit the museum. The story had spread overnight. Local news vans lined the street, and a steady stream of veterans of all ages arrived, many sharing their own stories of bureaucratic obstacles they'd faced. Each was welcomed personally, their service acknowledged regardless of documentation. Inside the Vietnam exhibition, a new edition had been unveiled, an enlarged photograph of James Harrington in his youth, standing alongside a young Lieutenant Roland. Beside it, a plaque detailed the actions that had earned him the Silver Star and saved the future general's life. James himself arrived shortly before noon, accompanied by 3 other veterans from his old unit who had seen the news and driven through the night to reunite with their brother-in-arms. They moved slowly through the exhibition, pausing at photographs, sometimes laughing, sometimes falling into reverent silence. In the afternoon, General Roland returned, this time with a photographer from the Pentagon. For the archives, he explained, as he and James stood together before the display honoring the 173rd Airborne Brigade, and to remind everyone that heroes don't always wear uniforms or medals in their daily lives. A group of schoolchildren on a field trip watched in awe as the general explained to them who James was and what he had done. Their wide eyes moved between the photograph of the young soldier and the elderly man before them, connecting past and present. Remember, the general told them, true heroes are often the quietest people you'll ever meet. They don't brag about what they've done. They don't demand special treatment, but they deserve our utmost respect. As James prepared to leave, visitors spontaneously formed a line to shake his hand. Many apologized, though they had nothing to apologize for, feeling somehow responsible for a system that had forgotten to see the hero behind the aged face. Judged not by appearances, one visitor was overhead telling her child, but by the character within. James Harrington returned to that museum every month thereafter, eventually becoming a volunteer guide for the military history section. His expired military ID remained in his wallet, but he never needed it again. Sometimes, the greatest respect we can show our heroes is simply to see them.